Jenny had been a professional dog walker for over 10 years and had never encountered a problem like this before. It started with a call from one of her regular clients, Mrs. Thompson, who reported that her beloved poodle, Charlie, had gone missing after his morning walk. Jenny assured her that she would do everything in her power to find him and set out with a heavy heart to search the neighborhood. Over the next few days, several more clients reported their dogs missing after walks with Jenny. Each time, she searched the area thoroughly, putting up posters and canvassing the neighborhood for any leads, but there was no sign of the missing dogs. Jenny started to feel increasingly uneasy about the situation. It was strange that so many dogs would go missing all at once, especially considering the neighborhoods where she usually walked them were generally safe and quiet. One day, as she was walking a new client's dog, a German shepherd named Max, she noticed something odd. Max was pulling her towards a deserted alleyway, where she could hear barking coming from underground. She hesitated for a moment, then followed Max's lead down the narrow staircase that led to the basement. What she found in the basement was both horrifying and disturbing. A group of men were gathered around a large pit, cheering as two pit bulls fought each other ferociously. The dogs were covered in blood, their faces and bodies mangled and torn. Jenny couldn't believe her eyes. She had heard about dogfighting rings, but she never thought she would stumble upon one in her own neighborhood. As she tried to sneak out of the basement, she was caught by one of the men who demanded to know what she was doing there. Jenny panicked, but her love for dogs and her desire to rescue the missing ones took over. She told the man that she was looking for her missing dog, hoping that he would let her go. But the man was suspicious and started to threaten her, asking her why she was there. Jenny knew that she had to act fast. She pulled out her phone and started to record the scene, hoping to get enough evidence to bring these people to justice. The man lunged at her, trying to grab her phone, but she managed to dodge him and run out of the basement. Jenny went straight to the police station and reported what she had seen. She handed over the video footage as evidence and told them about the missing dogs. The police were shocked by what they saw and immediately launched an investigation. Days turned into weeks, and the investigation led the police to a powerful and influential group of individuals who were running the dogfighting ring. They were making a fortune from these illegal fights and had managed to keep their activities hidden for years. Jenny knew that the missing dogs were probably being used in these fights, and it broke her heart to think of the pain and suffering they must be enduring. She couldn't bear the thought of leaving them there, so she decided to take matters into her own hands. Jenny planned her rescue mission carefully, knowing that it would be dangerous and risky. She recruited a few trusted friends to help her, and they spent weeks gathering information and mapping out the dogfighting ring's location. Finally, the day of the rescue arrived. Jenny and her team managed to sneak into the basement undetected, armed with pepper spray and other self-defense tools. They found the missing dogs caged and abused, waiting to be used as fighters. Jenny's heart was racing as she unlocked the cages and freed the dogs. They were terrified and confused, but Jenny and her team managed to calm them down and lead them out of the basement. However, as they were leaving, they were caught by the ring's security guards who were armed and ready to protect the operation at all costs. A violent and bloody fight ensued, with Jenny and her team using all their skills to defend themselves and the rescued dogs. In the end, they managed to overpower the guards and escape with the dogs. They made it back to Jenny's apartment, where they tended to the dogs' injuries and gave them food and water. But Jenny knew that their fight wasn't over yet. She had to make sure that those responsible for the dogfighting ring were brought to justice and that this kind of cruel and illegal activity was stopped for good. With the help of the police and the evidence she had gathered, Jenny was able to bring the leaders of the dogfighting ring to court. The ring's leaders were found guilty of animal cruelty and other charges and were sentenced to several years in prison. Jenny realized that she had found her true calling in life. She continued to fight for animal rights and became a beacon of hope for all those who were suffering. Her bravery and compassion had not only saved the lives of the missing dogs, but had also made a difference in the world. It was a typical Saturday night for Emma. As a professional dog walker, she was used to taking her clients' furry friends for walks at all hours of the day and night. This particular evening, however, was proving to be more difficult than usual. The dog she was walking, a large and rambunctious Great Dane, seemed determined to pull her in every direction but the one they needed to go. After struggling for over an hour, Emma finally managed to get the dog on a path that would take them through the nearby woods. As they made their way through the trees, Emma couldn't help but feel uneasy. It was a moonless night, and the woods were eerily quiet. The only sound was the rustling of leaves beneath their feet and the occasional snap of a twig. As they walked deeper into the woods, Emma suddenly heard a low growling sound coming from the trees. She immediately pulled the dog closer to her, assuming it was just a wild animal passing through. But then she heard it again, louder this time, and accompanied by a chilling howl. Emma's heart began to race as the growls and howls grew louder and more frequent. The dog she was walking became increasingly agitated, pulling at the leash and barking furiously. Emma realized then that they were being stalked, and she needed to get out of the woods as quickly as possible. As she tried to lead the dog back the way they had come, Emma suddenly saw a pack of wild and feral dogs emerge from the shadows. Their eyes glinted menacingly in the dark, and their howls filled the air. Emma knew then that they were in serious trouble. The pack of dogs began to close in, snarling and snapping at the air. Emma's heart was pounding in her chest as she tried to pull the Great Dane away from the pack, but it was no use. The dogs were too fast, too hungry, and too desperate. Emma felt teeth sinking into her flesh as she screamed in terror. She fought back with all her might, kicking and punching at the dogs, but they were too strong. The Great Dane was no help either, cowering and whining in fear. As the pack closed in, Emma knew that this was the end. But then, just when she thought all hope was lost, she heard a sound in the distance. It was the sound of a car engine, getting closer and closer. Suddenly, the pack of dogs turned and ran off into the woods, disappearing into the darkness. Emma lay on the ground, panting and bleeding, as she watched the car pull up beside her. The driver got out, a look of concern on his face, and rushed to her side. As Emma was taken to the hospital to be treated for her injuries, she couldn't shake the feeling that the pack of wild dogs was still out there, waiting and hungry. She knew that she would never be able to go back into those woods again, and she knew that she would never forget the terrifying howls that had haunted her that night. Days turned into weeks, and Emma's injuries healed, but the memory of that terrifying night stayed with her. She became increasingly paranoid, always looking over her shoulder and jumping at every little noise. She couldn't bring herself to walk dogs at night anymore, not after what had happened. But then one day a new client called her, desperate for someone to walk his dog late at night. Emma hesitated at first, but the money was too good to pass up. She agreed to take the job, telling herself that she could handle it. The night of the walk arrived, and Emma found herself back in those same woods. She tried to keep her nerves in check as she led the dog down the path, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her. As they walked deeper into the woods, Emma heard a faint howling sound in the distance. She tried to ignore it, telling herself that it was just her imagination, but the howls grew louder and more frequent. Suddenly, the dog she was walking began to pull at the leash, barking furiously. Emma turned to see a pack of wild dogs emerge from the trees, their eyes fixed on her and dog. Emma froze, her mind racing as she tried to remember what had happened the last time she was in this situation. But this time, she was prepared. She had brought a can of pepper spray with her, and she wasn't going down without a fight. As the pack of dogs charged towards her, Emma held out the can of pepper spray and sprayed it in their direction. The pack recoiled in pain, giving Emma and the dog enough time to make a run for it. They sprinted down a path as fast as they could, the howls of the pack echoing through the woods. But this time, Emma knew what to do. She kept running until she reached the road, where she flagged down a passing car and got herself and the dog to safety. As she sat in the car, panting and shaking, Emma realized that she had overcome her fear. She had faced her demons and emerged victorious. And although the memory of that terrifying night would always haunt her, she knew that she was stronger for having faced it head-on. Once upon a time, there was a man named John who enjoyed taking walks in his suburban neighborhood. One sunny day, while strolling down the street, he saw a stray dog running towards him. John didn't think much of it and assumed the dog would just pass him by, but instead, the dog lunged at him and bit his arm. John yelled out in pain and tried to fight the dog off, but it quickly ran away. Shaken, John went home and cleaned the wound. The bite was deep, and the wound began to hurt as time passed. He didn't think much of it at first, but a few days later, John started experiencing strange symptoms. His first indication was the pain in his arm, which had begun to throb, and his neck became stiff. He thought it was just a flu-like symptom and took some medicine for it, but it didn't seem to help. Instead, his condition worsened. John became more aggressive, and his thoughts became animalistic. He found himself wanting to hunt and kill things, which was something he had never experienced before. John was confused and frightened by his changing behavior, so he went to see a doctor. After conducting some tests, the doctor discovered that the dog that had bitten John was carrying a rare and deadly disease that affected the brain, causing aggressive and violent behavior. John was horrified. He realized that he was turning into something he didn't recognize, and he didn't know how to stop it. His friends and family noticed his odd behavior and distanced themselves from him. One day, while on a walk, John saw the stray dog that had bitten him. His instincts took over, and he began to chase after the dog. The dog ran, and John followed it into the woods. He had never been there before, but something inside him pushed him forward. As he followed the dog, he came across a dark, eerie cave. John felt compelled to enter, even though every instinct told him not to. Inside the cave, he found the dog, but it was no longer alone. John was surrounded by a pack of feral dogs that were also infected with the disease. The pack of dogs began to attack John, biting and clawing at him. John fought back, but he couldn't keep up with their relentless onslaught. The disease had consumed him, and he had become one of them. As the pack of dogs devoured John's body, he realized the horrors of his situation. He had become the very thing that he had feared and had no control over his own actions. John's fate had been sealed the moment the stray dog had bitten him, and now he was just another victim of the deadly disease. John's family and friends noticed that something was wrong with him. He had become more aggressive and withdrawn from his loved ones. They had noticed a change in his behavior and had grown increasingly concerned about his well-being. His wife, Jane, was the first to notice the physical changes in John. His eyes had become a bright yellow, and his skin had taken on a grayish hue. He had also started to grow hair all over his body, and his teeth had become razor sharp. Jane was terrified of the man she once knew. John had become more animalistic in his behavior, and it seemed like he was no longer the man she had married. She tried to convince him to see a doctor, but he refused, insisting that he was fine. As the days passed, John's behavior became more erratic. He started to hunt and kill small animals in the neighborhood, leaving their carcasses scattered around the yard. The neighbors grew increasingly alarmed, and some of them even called the police. One night, Jane woke up to find John gone. She searched the house and found a note on the kitchen table that read, "I have to find the dog." Jane knew exactly what he meant. John was talking about the stray dog that had bitten him. She called the police, and they began a search for John. They scoured the surrounding woods and found nothing. As the days passed, the police gave up their search, but Jane refused to give up on her husband. She started to do her own research on the disease that had infected John. She discovered that it was extremely rare and often fatal. She also found out that the disease was transmitted through bodily fluids, and that once it had infected a person, there was no known cure. Jane was terrified. She knew that if John had become infected, he was likely beyond help. But she refused to give up on him. She spent hours researching possible treatments and even reached out to specialists around the world. Meanwhile, John was still out there, somewhere in the woods, hunting and killing animals. He had become more and more feral, and his thoughts were consumed by the need to find the stray dog. One night, as he was prowling through the woods, he came across a group of hikers. John's animalistic instincts took over, and he attacked them. The hikers fought back, but they were no match for John's newfound strength and ferocity. The attack made headlines, and Jane saw the news coverage of her husband's brutal attack. She knew that she had to find him before he hurt anyone else. Jane spent weeks scouring the woods, following any leads she could find. She searched abandoned cabins and old hunting lines, but there was no sign of John. One day, as she was about to give up hope, she stumbled upon a cave. It was dark and foreboding, but something inside her told her that John was inside. She entered the cave cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. She called out to John, but there was no answer. As she moved deeper into the cave, she heard a low growling sound. Suddenly, she saw movement up ahead. It was John, and he was surrounded by a pack of feral dogs. They were snarling and snapping at him, and he was fighting back, his body covered in blood. Jane knew that she had to act fast. She took a deep breath and charged towards John and the pack of dogs. She grabbed John and pulled him away from the pack, shielding him from their attacks. Together, Jane and John stumbled out of the cave, their bodies battered and bruised. They collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air. It was then that Jane saw something she never thought she'd see again. John's eyes had turned back to their original color, and his skin had returned to its normal tone. The disease had run its course, and John was himself again. As they lay on the ground, catching their breath, Jane realized just how lucky they had been. They had survived a nightmare that had consumed their lives for weeks. And although they would never forget the horrors they had faced, they knew that they had come out the other side stronger and more determined than ever before. Maggie was thrilled when she heard that a new dog-walking business had opened in her small town. She had always loved dogs and had been searching for a job where she could spend her days with them. The new company, called Paws on the Go, offered affordable prices and customized walks for each dog. Maggie applied for a job at the company and was hired quickly. She started working with the dogs and enjoyed spending her days with them. The dogs were all unique, and Maggie loved learning about their personalities and quirks. However, she quickly noticed that some of the dogs seemed to be communicating with each other. They would bark and growl in a way that seemed almost coordinated. At first, she didn't think much of it, but as time went on, she started to notice more strange behavior. The pack's behavior was becoming increasingly erratic. Some of the dogs seemed more aggressive than usual, while others were lethargic and uninterested in playing. They would jump at shadows and start barking for no reason. Maggie couldn't understand what was going on. One day, while Maggie was out walking with the pack, she stumbled upon something that shocked her. She found a small packet of pills hidden in the grass. She recognized the pills as a powerful sedative that was often used to calm dogs down during vet visits. Maggie couldn't believe it. She realized that the company had been secretly drugging the dogs to make them more obedient and easier to manage. The pack's strange behavior was a result of withdrawal symptoms. She knew she had to do something. Maggie decided to investigate further. She started talking to the dogs' owners, asking them if they had noticed any strange behavior from their pets. Some of them said that they had, but they just assumed it was a result of the dogs being in a new environment. Maggie knew she had to take action. She started gathering evidence, taking pictures and recording audio of the pack's strange behavior. She even went undercover and posed as a dog owner to try to get more information from the company's employees. What she discovered was even more shocking. The company was not only drugging the dogs, but was also mistreating them. The dogs were being kept in small cages for long periods of time and were being denied food and water. Maggie couldn't stand by and watch this happen. She knew she had to act quickly to save the dogs. She reached out to local animal welfare groups and presented them with the evidence she had gathered. They were shocked by what they saw and immediately launched an investigation. The investigation revealed that the company had been operating illegally, without the proper permits and licenses. They were shut down, and the owners were arrested and charged with animal cruelty and abuse. The dogs were rescued and placed in loving homes. Maggie felt a sense of relief knowing that she had helped to save the dogs. She couldn't believe that something like this could happen in her small town. But she was also left with a sense of sadness knowing that these dogs had been mistreated and abused. She decided to start her own dog-walking business, one that would be ethical and compassionate towards all animals. She knew that she couldn't save every animal, but she promised herself that she would always do what she could to protect them. Maggie spent months planning and preparing for her new business. She researched the latest training techniques and studied up on animal behavior. She even took classes on first aid for pets. Finally, Maggie was ready to open her business. She named it Happy Paws and launched it with a big grand opening celebration. The event was a huge success, and many people in the community came out to support her. At Happy Paws, Maggie ensured that each dog was given personalized attention and care. She hired a team of experienced and passionate dog walkers who shared her values and love for animals. They treated each dog like a member of the family, and it showed in their happy and relaxed demeanor. Maggie also made sure to prioritize safety and security for the dogs. The dogs were always leashed during walks and kept in secure kennels during their downtime. The kennels were spacious and comfortable, and the dogs had access to plenty of water and toys. Over time, Happy Paws became a beloved institution in the town. Many dogs and their owners looked forward to their daily walks and playtime with the Happy Paws team. Maggie and her team even started offering additional services like grooming and training, which were also met with great success. One day, Maggie received a surprise visit from one of the dogs she had walked at Paws on the Go. The dog's owner explained that they had heard about the terrible things that had happened at the old company and were grateful for Maggie's bravery in bringing the issue to light. The dog, a large and playful golden retriever named Max, quickly became a regular at Happy Paws. Max loved playing with the other dogs and would always wag his tail excitedly when he saw Maggie. Maggie felt a sense of pride and joy knowing that she had made a positive impact on Max's life. As Happy Paws continued to grow, Maggie knew that she wanted to expand her services even further. She began working with local animal shelters and rescue groups to provide opportunities for dogs in need of homes to be taken on walks and given attention. This partnership also helped raise awareness about animal rescue and adoption, which was important to Maggie. As Happy Paws became more involved in the community, Maggie also began to notice some strange behavior in some of the dogs she walked. They would act nervous or hesitant around certain people or places, and Maggie couldn't quite figure out why. Maggie decided to investigate further and started talking to the dogs' owners. What she discovered was deeply troubling. Some of the dogs had been rescued from abusive situations and were still traumatized from their experiences. Others had been mistreated by their previous owners and were struggling with trust issues. Maggie knew she had to do something to help these dogs. She began working with a local therapist who specialized in animal behavior and started implementing new training techniques to help the dogs overcome their trauma and trust issues. Over time, Maggie saw amazing progress in the dogs she worked with. They became more confident and playful, and their owners were overjoyed to see the positive changes in their pets. Maggie knew that her work was making a real difference in the lives of these animals and felt grateful for the opportunity to help them. As Happy Paws continued to grow, Maggie remained committed to her mission of providing the best possible care for all dogs. She worked tirelessly to ensure that each dog was happy, healthy, and loved. One day, as Maggie was out walking with a pack of dogs, she looked around at the beautiful scenery and felt a sense of contentment. She knew that her journey had been filled with challenges, but she had persevered and come out on the other side with a successful business and a deep sense of purpose. As the dogs played and ran around her, Maggie felt a sense of joy and fulfillment that she had never experienced before. She knew that she was doing something meaningful with her life, and that was all that mattered. Olivia was a professional dog walker with a deep love for dogs. She had been in the business for years and had seen it all. She loved nothing more than spending her days walking, playing, and caring for dogs of all breeds and sizes. One day, she received a call from a new client. The client wanted Olivia to walk her dog, a Great Dane named Rufus, every day at the newly opened dog park on the outskirts of town. Olivia had never heard of the dog park before, but she was excited to check it out. When she arrived at the park, Olivia was amazed. The park was enormous, with plenty of space for the dogs to run and play. The grass was lush and green, and there were several trees that provided ample shade. There were also several water fountains for the dogs to drink from, and plenty of benches for owners to relax on. Olivia couldn't believe how well maintained the park was. She had been to many dog parks before, but none of them compared to this one. She could see why her client had insisted on bringing Rufus here every day. As soon as Olivia let Rufus off his leash, he bounded off to play with the other dogs. Olivia watched with a smile as he ran and jumped, his long tongue lolling out of his mouth. She couldn't help but feel happy and content in such a serene environment. As the days went on, Olivia continued to take Rufus to the park, and she started to notice some odd things. There were some dogs there that never seemed to leave. They were always there, even when Olivia arrived early in the morning or late in the evening. They would just sit in the same spot, staring out into space. Olivia couldn't help but wonder why these dogs were always there. She asked their owners, but they just shrugged and said their dogs loved the park so much that they never wanted to leave. Olivia found this strange, but she didn't dwell on it too much. As the weeks passed, Olivia started to notice more strange things. There were times when she heard strange noises coming from the woods that surrounded the park. It sounded like animals were crying out in pain or distress. Olivia tried to investigate but couldn't find anything. One day, she even found a dog that had been left behind in the park overnight. It was a small, scrappy-looking dog with matted fur and dirty paws. Olivia knew she had to help, so she took the dog to the vet and got him cleaned up. She found him a new home, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was not right about the park. Olivia began to investigate the park's strange occurrences, and the deeper she looked, the more she uncovered. She found evidence of animal abuse and neglect, including dogs that were malnourished and injured. The strange noises she heard in the woods surrounding the park became more frequent and disturbing. Olivia was horrified. She knew she had to do something to help the dogs, but she didn't know where to start. She reached out to local animal welfare groups, but they were hesitant to get involved. They had heard rumors about the park, but had never been able to confirm them. Undeterred, Olivia decided to take matters into her own hands. She started documenting everything she saw and heard at the park, taking pictures and recording audio. She talked to the dogs' owners and urged them to report any suspicious activity they noticed. One day, while she was walking Rufus, Olivia heard a sound coming from the woods. It was a low growling, and it was getting closer. She looked around but saw nothing. Suddenly, Rufus started barking and pulling at his leash, trying to drag her away. That's when Olivia saw it. A figure was emerging from the woods. It was a man, dressed in rags and covered in dirt. He was holding a large stick and was heading straight for her. Olivia's heart raced. She knew she had to protect Rufus and herself. She tried to turn around and leave the park, but the man was blocking her way. She called out for help, but there was no one around. The man lunged at her, but she was able to dodge him. Rufus barked and snapped at him, distracting him for a moment. Olivia used that opportunity to run as fast as she could. She made it out of the park and called the police. The police arrived at the park and found the man. He was a drifter who had been living in the woods, using the dogs in the park as his food source. He had been capturing them at night, killing them, and then leaving their remains in the woods. Olivia was horrified. She couldn't believe that something like this could happen in her town. She was glad that she had acted and had helped to uncover the park's dark secrets. In the end, Olivia was hailed as a hero by the local animal welfare groups. They helped to shut down the park and bring the owners of the dogs that had been neglected and abused to justice. Olivia continued to work as a dog walker, but the experience had changed her. She was more vigilant and cautious, always keeping an eye out for signs of animal abuse or neglect. Over the years, Olivia kept in touch with some of the dogs' owners who had been affected by the park's atrocities. She offered them support and helped them with any veterinary bills that may have arisen. But Olivia also started to experience nightmares about the park and the atrocities that had taken place there. One day, Olivia woke up in a cold sweat, feeling as though something was wrong. She had a nagging feeling that she had missed something, a clue that could have led her to uncover the park's dark secrets sooner. She decided to go back to the park and investigate again. As Olivia walked through the abandoned park, she felt a chill run down her spine. The park was empty, and it felt like something was watching her. She noticed a strange pile of dirt near one of the trees and decided to investigate. As she dug through the dirt, Olivia found something that made her gasp. It was a dog collar with a name tag on it. The name tag belonged to Rufus, the Great Dane that had been her client. She felt her heart sink as she realized that he must have been one of the dogs that the drifter had captured and killed. Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that she had failed Rufus and the other dogs in the park. She felt guilty for not uncovering the truth sooner and for not doing enough to help them. She knew she couldn't change the past, but she decided to honor their memory by creating a memorial for them. With the help of the local animal welfare groups, Olivia created a beautiful garden near the park's entrance. She planted flowers and trees in memory of the dogs that had been mistreated and killed. She also created a plaque with their names and a message urging others to be vigilant and speak up against animal abuse and neglect. As Olivia stood in the garden, she felt a sense of closure. She knew that she couldn't save every animal, but she promised herself that she would always do what she could to protect them. The memory of the horror that she had witnessed in the park would stay with her forever. But she found comfort in knowing that the dog's memory would live on. As Olivia turned to leave the park, she noticed a small group of dogs in the distance. They were wagging their tails and looking at her with their bright eyes. Olivia felt a wave of emotion as she realized that these dogs were survivors of the park. She walked over to them and knelt, patting their heads and offering them treats. Olivia felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that the fight against animal abuse and neglect was ongoing, but she was determined to keep fighting. She would be their voice, their protector, and their champion. As she left the park, she felt a sense of hope and a renewed commitment to making the world a better place for all animals.